finished their day's work and they went home. It had been a day pretty much like the day before and the one before that. They expected the next day, September the 11th, to be about the same again. We now know how wrong that expectation would be. There have been many stories told about last September 11th. Our first story is about the storytellers. It's about what happened in newsrooms and to news people that day. A minute-by-minute reconstruction of how journalists tried to report what was happening as it was happening. The second documentary will trace the harrowing ordeal of a Canadian who survived the disaster, an ordeal that is far from over. First, though, a documentary produced and directed by Desmond Smith. It captures a day when hard information was desperately craved by so many people turning to their televisions and radios. Yet it was precisely that hard information that was so elusive for journalists. But everyone tried, and it's that effort you will witness during this broadcast. You can judge how successful they were as the towers fell and journalists struggled to tell the story of their lives.
Good morning. 64 degrees at 8 o'clock. It's Tuesday, September 11th. I'm Lee Harris. Here's what's happening. It's primary day, and the polls are open in New York City. Voters are deciding among about...
It's going to be a beautiful day today. Sunshine throughout. Low humidity. Really a splendid September day. The afternoon temperature about 80 degrees. Great weather for the primary election. Tonight, clear and cool, though. 60 in Midtown, 52 in many suburbs. Tomorrow, sunny and dry.
What we were doing for the day was covering the election.
I was a business reporter who was meeting somebody supposed to be at 9:30 in the morning in 2 World Trade Centers. So I got there a bit early, got there about 20 to 9 New York time.
I was covering fashion of the week in New York City.
That morning it was election day, and I was going to work late, and I was going to take my son to go vote, and I switched on to the all-news cable channel to see what the weather was like outside.
And I was sitting in the lobby musing and just reading the papers, killing time really, when the walls shook and there was this thud.
Oh, shit! We think, I think like explosion, like shutter window. It's not a big explosion.
At 8:48, we got this call that there was a fire at the top of the World Trade Center. I don't have a lot more detail on this than that at the moment, but you can see, obviously, there's a lot of smoke there. We had a shot available to us looking from the Empire State Building, and we punched that up within just a few seconds of getting that first report, and immediately it was clear, just from the amount of smoke, that it was a serious fire.
Welcome back to the program. We've got some breaking news to tell you about something we're just learning about ourselves here. Apparently, a small passenger plane has crashed into one of the World Trade Towers.
And I got into a taxi, and the driver said that a plane had flown into the Empire State Building in New York. And I said, well, you get me to the CBC as fast as you can.
As we come on air, we have serious news of a major possible air crash in the United States. A plane appears to have crashed into one of New York's tallest buildings, the World Trade Center.
I mean, we knew it was something odd because the weather was clear, but it still seemed like it might be simply an accident. But it was an alert to me, and I began to move from the doctor's office to the television studios.
And I walked in, and a producer came up to me. She was shaking. And she said, "What is going on?" And I said, "I don't know what you mean. What is going on?" And she said, "Well, there have been terrorists attacking New York."
I was at home on the Upper East Side in Manhattan, where I do a fair amount of my work when I'm not editing or filming. They got through to me, and it was absolutely frantic, and they told me, switch on the television, this is what has just happened. And they said, you're live, and you're live with us in 2 minutes.
I mean, I was getting calls from everywhere, and it was, let's go on air and tell us what you know, more or less. I mean, whether it's in French, English, or Chinese, to be quite frankly, I think that they were just interested in getting as much information from here. The ironic thing is that I really had no more information than they did up in Toronto.
Breaking news now on 1010 Wins.
This just into our newsroom. A plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
I heard the plane very close to the top of the buildings. I looked outside and I saw it hit and it exploded immediately.
Sure, I had the local radio station on, but I mean, you know how it happened that morning. I mean, pretty much every media organization was so freaked out.
We can see via television pictures large plumes of black smoke, as you mentioned, and it seems to be concentrated at the top of the building, correct?
Correct, correct.
It was a horrifying morning. It was a morning where I remember the taste of metal in my mouth and actually feeling fear.
And you're listening to live coverage here on 680 News via CNN of what appears to be a commercial jetliner, a passenger plane that has gone into approximately the 20th floor of one of the World Trade Center towers.
It was 8:48. The editor hit the intercom and said, "Oh my God, guys, check this out." And we have a bank of television monitors in master control, and all of us just jaws dropped, looking up, seeing the World Trade Center, seeing that there was a massive hole in the side of it.
The magnitude was, you know, incredible. So it was, I knew we had to get another reporter going. So we got on the phone with Kevin Meisner, told him to pack some underwear and get going.
Carl was driving, and I was calling in reports as we were headed down.
I remember listening to the radio, driving, listening to the radio, getting information, almost still not believing what was going on. Still at that point, you're like, you're waiting for it to be, no, this isn't really happening.
Is this going to be a world war unfolding right in front of us right now? I mean, we had no idea. I mean, the analysts weren't blowing their hot air just yet.
If you're just joining us, we're watching pictures of the World Trade Center on fire in New York.
One of the strange things that I noticed was that very, very quickly, people in London, the presenters in London who were interviewing me, knew far more about what was going on than I did. You know, I was being asked questions about whether it was a plane that went in, all that kind of thing, and I would say things like, I simply don't know. People here say it was a plane, and the presenter was coming back and saying, no, we're telling you that it was a plane.
I had just arrived here just after the first tower was hit. Most of the phones were not working, cell phones were not working. Already we were having communication problems.
You know, the American networks, as we are right now, scrambling to find out. All we can tell you, which is coming over on the newswire, just as plane crashes into the World Trade Center, according to television reports. Obviously, this has just happened.
I pulled open the shades for the first time that day, and it was a glorious morning. And of course, right in front of me were the World Trade Center towers. From the distance, I saw the North Tower burning like a chimney. I thought that something had hit it.
680 News Time, 9 o'clock. Breaking news, eyewitnesses say a passenger jet has slammed into the side of the 110-story North Tower of the World Trade Center. You were listening.
My son and I were watching. I kept looking back on TV, and I thought, my God, I have to go to work.
Are you hearing anything about what kind of a plane it was, or how many were on board?
No. Just as I was watching, all of a sudden there was a jetliner just sort of, you know, amid the skyscrapers. In my memory, I don't really remember it hitting the second building. I just saw a plane there. I saw it hanging there, and I thought 1,000 different things in the second before it hit. And then I realized it was going to hit, and I thought, all this, it must have been a nanosecond, and then there was just a huge, huge orange explosion.
You see it at those last seconds when just by chance I happened to pan over to the South Tower and pick up the image of this aircraft coming into the tower.
There were early reports that, in fact, the first plane may have been a big plane, an airliner. And in my mind, that seemed so impossible, I dismissed it as an impossibility. I thought, no, it must be a small plane.
Holy fuck! Oh my God! Oh my God!
And then suddenly the second plane hit. And now I could see with my own eyes that this was no small plane. This was a major airliner. In fact, what I had them do is isolate it on videotape and play it back in slow motion so that everybody could actually see this was not a small plane. Once that happened, I mean, that was the marker for me that said we are into something we've never been into before.
Ready, kite. Yes, kite. Get ready.
It's just after 9 a.m. President Bush is at an education event when an aide gives him the first whispered news of the New York bombings. His face clouds with anxiety.
At the count of 3, everyone should be on page.
That's what it looks like. Both of the towers in the Twin Trade Towers are now on fire. We have no idea whatsoever the measure of casualties inside or the measure of damage inside, though you can only imagine it.
After the second tower was hit, I think there was a sensation in the newsroom, and certainly it didn't, I was on the air, but there was a sensation that the United States was under some kind of all-out attack.
People are talking, was it a deliberate navigational error? Of course, this all refers back to the February 1993 bombing of the World Trade Towers, in which 6 people were killed and more than 1,000 people were injured. And that, of course, a terrorist attack.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I, unfortunately, will be going back to Washington after my remarks.
The president's in Florida today pushing his education reform. It will get wiped off the agenda today in view of this extraordinarily serious accident.
It's interesting because when I watched the building on fire, I didn't really think that there were people inside of it. It seemed too unbelievable that there were people inside of it. It seemed too unbelievable that there were people inside these planes.
In the early going, we of course flooded with wire copy, and they kept running it into me. It was repetitive, it was speculative, it indicated that really nobody knew anything.
We were having to sift through very quickly a lot of rubbish that was coming off various agencies and networks.
Happenstance.
Hold it, Mr. Jenkins. We're looking. There are 2 jets right now approaching the World Trade Center. We're watching. Hold on. I'm sorry, no. The one aircraft is cleared. We can't tell whether it was a plane or a chopper from our vantage point. I apologize, Mr. Jenkins.
No, that's okay.
We're more than a bit gun shy.
There was an atmosphere of real hysteria here in New York.
People were looking at the buildings and just crying and screaming. It was just not a normal scene, but still I don't think I was able to grasp exactly what had happened.
It was such a shock to the system, journalistically, that really nobody could grasp it.
I'm Susan McGinnis, CBS News in New York. A scene of massive destruction in downtown Manhattan this morning. The Associated Press is reporting that a senior government official says the FBI is investigating reports that one or both planes were hijacked and the crashes may have been the result of a suicide mission. At this hour,
when I saw the second plane hit the second tower, I picked up the phone and called a hotel in Islamabad in Pakistan, because although there was no indication of who was responsible for these attacks, it was quite clear to me that it was going to be a huge story, and that whether or not he was responsible, the finger was going to start pointing at Osama bin Laden.
Everyone wondered when was the New York Stock Exchange going to open. Well, you turned on the television, and there were reporters from CNBC covered in dust standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. They were alone.
Our own reporters who were in the New York Stock Exchange, we couldn't even account for. We didn't know where they were, whether they were safe, and as you remember at the time, it was still unclear, even though we had pictures, just what was the extent of the damage.
Traders were moved from the London Stock Exchange. They, too, watched the televised pictures in disbelief.
Some left one of London's main financial office buildings. American firms sent their workers home.
The markets had to close early. Before they closed, they plunged. Gold is up over $17. Oil prices are up. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? People are very concerned. There's already talk about recession.
It was awkward for us because it was an enormous human tragedy. We didn't know how many people had died, yet it was a business story because it had cut right into the heart of the business district of the Western world, the World Trade Center.
Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. We're looking at a live picture from Washington, and there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon. It would appear that there has been another major explosion, this one in the nation's capital.
I'm on my way to National Airport, not knowing that nothing is flying, to get the next plane to New York. When I'm in the taxi going to National Airport, somebody comes on the taxi cab two-way and says, "Oh my God, plane just went into the Pentagon."
Associated Press is reporting that it was a plane that crashed at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon is being evacuated. There is a large fire there, and that is the smoke you see in the shot that you're looking at now. Whether that fire is in the building itself or outside, we have not yet confirmed.
We're passing the Pentagon at this point. I mean, the road to National Airport takes you past the Pentagon. I'd look over to my right. Sure enough, there's this plume of smoke coming out of the Pentagon, the plume with the papers suspended in it, the stuff that had been sitting there on people's desks just moments ago.
We're getting a report that the FAA has halted all takeoffs, all traffic nationwide, that all aircraft are grounded.
There is a fire on the mall in Washington. The cause of the fire on the mall in Washington, we cannot yet tell you. We can tell you that the White House has been evacuated, and we can tell you that 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. All of this began just a little more than an hour ago at about 8:45 Eastern Time.
Tell me, when a big explosion happened, some guy came out, his skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over.
We saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
I started seeing people They started jumping out of the window, like the 96th floor. They just started, one at a time, in different parts of the building. I just started seeing people just drop. And I must have counted like 30 or 40 people, you know.
Every window, you have 3 heads. You know, I see 3 heads from the window, you know, waving for help. But they can't help.
This one rescue worker I talked to said he was standing there shortly after the second plane hit, looking for people to help, when he started hearing explosions going off all around him, and he couldn't quite figure out what the explosions were until he suddenly realized that it was people hitting the ground and basically blowing up. He said it was like the sound of ripe tomatoes hitting the ground.
You know, the horror of what people saw in coming out of this building. These weren't people who were in a war zone, but they were seeing the same sort of thing. There was no context, there was nothing to compare it to.
There have been the most terrible, shocking events taking place in the United States of America within the last hour or so, including 2 hijacked planes being flown deliberately into the World Trade Center. I'm afraid we can only imagine the terror and the carnage there.
Government sources telling CNN that President Bush, who had been in Florida
for a 2-day trip and who broke that trip off this morning to head back to Washington will now not return to Washington. We do not know where the president will land.
You saw the second plane hit. I guess it's a vantage point issue.
No, couldn't see it from this side. I didn't see it, and I was here when the second hit.
I had walked down, and then I came over here, and I framed my camera with the St. Paul's Chapel in front of the Twin Towers burning, and I just started taking the pictures. And then at 9:50, the building collapsed in front of my lens.
Most of the people around simply can't understand what happened. People were just standing around, talking to each other, nodding their heads.
Oh my God. When the first building started to tumble, there was a tremendous roar.
We gotta go, we gotta go.
Firefighters and police and people were running out saying, "Move it, go." And that's when I saw the first building come down.
Oh my God.
You know, when I saw building collapse, I said, everybody dead. Absolutely everybody dead.
Oh my God! The building just crumbled.
This is 1010 Winds, WINS New York. One of the
completely down.
2 towers, the south tower of the World Trade Center, has just collapsed.
And there was a moment of silence.
A situation that started bad just gets worse and worse and worse.
Before your eyes, something you've never seen and something no one would ever want to see again. That is a 110-story building collapsing before our eyes shortly after apparent terrorist attack of a plane flying directly into that building.
There are all kinds of cliches that get used in these things, and one of them is, we were shocked. I think people really were shocked into silence. They were stunned into silence. I mean, it was eerily quiet there.
Then I heard screams, and people were starting to run.
We are about to get fucking swamped. Get in the building, quick! Over here! Get in! Get in! Get in here!
When people started screaming, I thought as well, there's another plane coming in.
It was an incredible scene. We saw people that just ran out of their shoes.
There was a heavy-duty explosion, and everybody just started running for the door. Everybody was trapped. Eventually, when the dust lifted, I saw some light and started screaming for everybody to go out towards the light.
And I just said, oh my God, this is really bad. And then I started running, and I stole 5 frames of the cloud coming at me.
I realized that at the very moment of seeing the dust cloud power up the street, as if it was a scene from Star Trek where an alien being was literally powering up the street to overtake all the people in the street.
I saw it blow and then ran like hell. Thank God. I'm 69, but I can still run.
With this tragedy that we've seen at the World Trade Center today, you have to imagine that some people probably did not make it out all right.
Shut the door! Shut the door! Get in! Get in! Get in! I'll bring this shit in!
I saw people running into shop doorways, archways to shelter themselves. I had thoughts of, no, surely the plane won't hit here. God's not going to let me die right now.
Thank
Don't worry, don't worry.
It was a big explosion and everything got dark, real dark, like snow. You can see behind me, oh, this is not snow, this is all from the building. It was a terrible nightmare.
What really was astonishing was the absolute silence that happened, and this my overwhelming sense of fear, and thinking that I had finally been in a place that I shouldn't have been at that moment.
People were streaming toward me by the thousands. By the time I'd walked 40 to 50 blocks, I probably passed thousands of people trying to get out of there, people who also were stuck there and couldn't get out any other way but on foot, who had been working in that area and even in the building.
It's like a Bruce Willis movie, like Die Hard, with explosions and the Army helicopters circling overhead, police with machine guns and giant shotguns. And they were pointing them at people. I mean, if you tried to get across, they'd step back, pointed their weapon at you, and said, back off, get away.
Let's go! Get off now! Go! Walk! Walk! Get back! Let's go!
I got in my car and I drove in, and I was the only person going across the Williamsburg Bridge the wrong way. Hundreds of people were streaming out. I took a woman across the bridge with me who was trying to find her children, and I got into the Times, and everyone was there working. It was amazing. The editors were all there, and I had been there 2 minutes, and I was made one of 2 editors who were in charge of just sort of keeping track of where everyone was.
I got down as far as Canal Street, about 15 blocks away or something like that. It was totally congested there. I remember I got out of the cab and just ran from there, and I started running towards the World Trade Center. I got there. I got to about 3 blocks away, just a block below where I live, when the first tower started to come down.
Our photographer, David Hansher, who was thrown, he thinks he was thrown 50 or 60 feet, wound up under a fire truck and was saved by a fireman.
You know, much later that day, another building fell down, 7 World Trade Center. And I was on the phone with the reporter. She started screaming, I have to get out of here, and the line went dead.
Better where? It's better where? Better in here, okay.
We kicked in a door of a building that was right beside us and went into the vestibule and then kicked out a panel of the second window and reached around and got in, at least got in, and part of the cloud, of course, came in with us, but we got a pocket of air. And then we saw this shadowy figure banging on that window saying, help me, and we for an instant looked at each other and thought, if we open that door, we're all going to die, and if we don't, he's going to die. And we just grabbed him as fast as possible, opened the door and pulled him in, and it was a New York City police officer.
Put your mask on. Put your mask on. I'll put it down for you. Mayor, what's the situation right now?
The situation is that 2 airplanes have attacked, apparently. Can't go to sleep. Why? We should not go to sleep. All right, well then let's go north then.
Can you tell us basically what happened to 2 airplanes?
Come with us. Come with us. Well, let's talk a little later, okay?
Okay. City Hall.
Think about it. You're not safe here. You're not safe here. Get it? Go north.
There were civilians directing traffic, and there were police out there also saying, you know, you can't go down there. But obviously, myself and I saw other journalists, radio reporters, photographers, were basically ignoring what the police were saying. We were down there to do a job, and we obviously, one police officer on a corner saying, don't go there, was not going to keep journalists from heading down to the scene.
I went down there with 2 of our younger staff members, and I told them that I had lots of experience, that I could get across any roadblock anywhere in the world. And they looked at me like, yeah, sure. And for the next 2 hours, we got rejected at every single roadblock. In fact, you could hear them on the radios. If that moron comes to you again at the next corner, make sure that he gets arrested. And the National Guard were warning us that if we tried again, that they were going to throw us in jail.
The police, you know, I think maybe the police did the right job. They stopped me. If they don't stop me, I'll be dead now.
Just 2 blocks from here, there was a construction site, and the construction workers were making stretchers to carry out the wounded and the dead. And they were loading these things onto a sanitation department dump truck.
Taking apart these plywoods over here, basically putting together stretchers for the bodies, you know, and hopefully we'll find, you know, more live ones than dead ones, basically. You know, God bless everybody. We're getting our workers, everybody's basically volunteering.
Don't get hurt, guys. Take it easy. The city of New York is coming together here.
You tell me what you think. I mean, my heart's in my mouth. I mean, I pray for these people. There's no words to describe what's going on out there. I mean, you see bodies just coming a half hour later, still coming out of the goddamn sky. Devastating. Devastating.
Where do I stand?
Right here, baby. Right on top of that crate.
I guess you got my picture of Buffalo, right? You saw the building.
We're being kept so far back that it's almost impossible for us to accurately report the facts. There have been mistakes made, and they have given false hope, and that's because it's hard to get what's true out to people who need it. And sometimes the only way to do that is to just try to get hands-on and get there yourself and witness it yourself.
By the time we got down there, the U.S. Marshals were starting to form a line. The police were forming a line, blocking anybody who didn't have police credentials, which I didn't have on me, from getting any closer. We got down to about a block and a half from the site, which was quite close, but not right on the site, when U.S. Marshals were there with automatic weapons, and that was it. Nobody was going in. Nobody knew what was happening.
We're also told that an organization that calls itself the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine is claiming responsibility.
What has happened? 2 attacks. There have been in Manhattan, one plane colliding with one twin tower. 18 minutes later, oh my God.
Oh my God, there it goes!
Oh my God. We kept expecting that somehow that they would get a control of the situation, that authorities could get people out of the building, that there could be an end to this series of attacks, and what we saw here was really the epitome of it, you know, spiraling out of control. And I'm standing like anyone else watching this thinking, how can this happen? How could this situation be getting even worse? And the only thing that's running through my mind as I see this is I'm just thinking about the people.
Let's go, guys. Let's go. Right here, right here. Stay right here. Let's go. Here it comes. Move it now. Let's go.
At the time, we were under the impression that there could be as many as 50,000 people in the 2 twin towers. And as this building is going down, the only thing that's running through my mind is how many people are going down with it. I was shocked like anyone else watching it.
And there's, you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord. There are no words.
It's tough to keep your emotions in check, especially when you can put a human face on this. And at the time, I guess what kept my emotions in check is just trying to understand what was going on.
It's a war. We've been attacked. It's like World War II. It's World War II. It's unbelievable.
I think people started to realize that people had died. You still had no idea.
It is a scene out of Dante's Hell. Horrific. No World Trade Tower is standing. Time, 10:30, Lower Manhattan.
You want to be responsible, and you want to try to detach yourself from the human side of it. But when you see something like this that you've never seen in your life before, it can't help but move you. I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't be moved by it.
Nobody really knew how many people got out. We had an idea of how many people had been in the buildings. We knew it was thousands. It had just been the start of the workday.
Take all that. I'm the last one.
I guess the dominant feeling then was nobody knew where to go because nobody knew where was safe anymore. Because all you heard is that more things were coming. And by this time, military planes were coming overhead.
Oh, it collapsed right now. As you can see, I assume you're taking our picture. I do not have a monitor, but right now we just had a middle section here of the E-ring of the Pentagon collapse from the amount of fire and destruction from this.
You could see in this shot, our viewers can, a helicopter shot coming across the harbor, the Statue of Liberty prominent in the foreground, and smoke and devastation and tragedy in the background. A tragedy that continues to unfold, and one that still has many, many unanswered questions. We have a report now that a car bomb has exploded at the State Department.
It was a constant situation where you felt, I don't get it. Because look what we were dealing with, the enormity of the situation. None of us had ever been confronted with anything like this in our lives. And trying to understand it, well, you couldn't understand it. It was too awful, it was too horrible. You're dealing with pictures that you'd only ever seen in a movie theater. And that became an issue. How often do you run these pictures? They're so terrible, they're so graphic. Some we stopped running almost immediately, the people leaping off the top floors of the World Trade Center. Others, the planes going in, we kept running, in spite of the fact we were getting a lot of calls from people.
We seem to think that with people of different ethnic groups, different colors in other countries, when there's death and destruction with them, we tend to be a little more liberal at what we show. Hacked up people in Kenya or the Sudan seems to be acceptable, with maybe even a warning at the beginning of the show that this is graphic video, but they're things that we'd never show Americans.
What struck me immediately was that there were a lot more doctors and nurses than there were patients. And now there were a lot of people coming in, but with cuts and bruises. You could tell they were set up for people with, you know, serious burn wounds, people who were in a life and death situation, and that's certainly not what I saw.
I want to translate a story to you that another man told me. He was near the building. He was on the lobby level, near the shopping area, near the promenade. The elevator doors, he said to me, blew open. And when the doors opened, there was a man on fire inside that elevator.
People expected that there would be lots of bodies coming out, that there would be many, many wounded people. The doctor that was there to coordinate the medical efforts came to me and he said, I've got nothing to do. There are no wounded people. Everybody's dead.
The image that will stay with me most was one doctor I spoke to who had gone over to Chelsea Piers, where they had set up sort of a quasi-MASH unit. And there was a doctor sitting next to each bed, but not a single bed was ever filled, not a single patient was ever brought in. And by late that evening, on Tuesday, I think they realized that that was going to be the case.
I saw one body come out at around 6 o'clock in the evening on the 11th. And from 6 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning when I left, there were no other bodies that were recovered.
Days after, people were asking me in broadcasts, what about the people trapped under there? And I kept saying, well, I can't imagine anybody being trapped under there. I don't think people realized until much, much later what the scale of destruction of human beings was.
I can tell you that the lower Manhattan area resembles a scene out of an eerie science fiction film. The smoke billowing from lower Manhattan where the Twin Towers once stood. All of lower Manhattan, as far north as here at City Hall and even further north, it is completely covered in a blanket of soot, debris, dust, anything you can imagine. It is here.
And I look up and the tower just starts crumbling down. And everybody in the street just stops and started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon too.
As soon as the second plane hit and it became clear that it was a deliberate terrorist action, I mean, now suddenly it's not a local news story anymore, it's a world news story.
We're told that the Secretary of Defense is being evacuated from the Pentagon. A portion of the Pentagon has collapsed.
You can see the fire department officials trying to get that situation under control at the side of the Pentagon building, where we're told a light aircraft crashed into the Pentagon building. The damage, we're told, is minor.
And in Washington, a state of emergency was declared.
Everybody back. Everybody back.
The White House, the Capitol building, all empty. And by mid-morning, every federal building in Washington was evacuated, sending nearly 250,000 people into the streets.
I'm actually astonished, I'm scared to death, and I'm praying for all of us.
This is the thing about journalism, is this is a terribly scary thing that's going on. 3 planes that have crashed into American icons, obviously, deliberately, lots of death, we're under attack. But as a journalist, what you get to focus on is, how do I tell the story?
In Pennsylvania, a 757 down. We believe it was hijacked. Exactly why it crashed, we are not sure.
Tell me what you saw. What were you doing and what did you see?
I seen it bank to the right. And I thought, well, maybe it's going to the Freedom's Airport. But whenever it banked, it went straight down. And it crashed. And I seen the smoke and the flame come up, and it was terrible.
Every airport around the country has been shut down for the first time in the country's history. The FAA says now that there will be no commercial air traffic in the United States until at least noon tomorrow.
When the airlines were ordered to bring their planes to ground, that they were coming to Canada in many numbers. We had to get crews there. We had to get satellite trucks there. We had to report that story.
It's awful. I'm afraid it's the end of the world.
Just one passenger on hundreds of aircraft destined for the U.S., but rerouted to Canadian airports. This man in Toronto hosted 200 New York guests at his daughter's wedding last night. They're stranded.
The groom's sister left a 4-week-old child with a nurse who they can't even get through. The nurse is supposed to leave. They can't even, the phones are all tied up. It's total chaos.
I remember when there was a report that there was a plane that was being escorted into, military escort into Whitehorse. Now, who would have thought Whitehorse? Suddenly Whitehorse became very important. We didn't know what would happen there.
We appreciate your patience very much. I'll give you just a very brief description of what we know. We had received a report through our communication lines that what would appear to be maybe a terrorist activity or hijacking has occurred.
Passengers knew something important had happened. 1 or 2 started making videos. It's only when the jets are on the ground that the passengers first get the news of September 11th.
By the end of the afternoon, the impact was most obvious at airports. London's Heathrow was filled with passengers whose planes, headed for the U.S., had been turned back in the air.
It almost looks like one of those implosions of buildings that you see, except there is nothing controlled about this. This is devastation. How many people? There are 50,000 people who normally go to work in the Trade Center buildings. How many of those people had arrived already? How many of those people were trapped on the upper stories? How many of those people have been hurt? How many of those people died? We cannot tell you now. We can tell you that hospitals throughout the New York area are receiving literally hundreds of patients
maybe 35,000 deaths this morning so far. Tens of billions of dollars worth of destruction, as if that counts against this much of a loss of life.
I should point out, I know you used that figure 35,000 based on what could have happened here today.
I think we'll be very lucky if if that many people did not die. And God knows, hundreds of Canadians work in the World Trade Center.
Well, let's just underline at this time that we don't know.
Yeah, not yet.
There were a lot of things that got on the air that day on our network, because I'm sure many other networks that weren't right. You know, we had planes crashing in places they didn't crash. We had a bomb going off in a place no bomb went off. There was misinformation.
There's this giant news organization gathering material, and it all is going to come out of one mouth, his. And so he, being the sharp point of this pencil, has got to be kept aware of what is happening, but doesn't have to know things that he doesn't have to know. So it's really a filtering job that I have as the producer in his ear.
And when you're in that position as an anchor, you have obviously the story to tell. You have people in your ear through your little telex.
If he's doing an interview, I try not to speak to him while he's speaking, but the only other time I have to speak to him is when he's listening. So he asks a question, and that's when I inevitably will try to pop into his ear to tell him where we're going next.
We have an airline expert standing by in Calgary. We have a terrorism expert in New York. We have a security expert in Montreal. They're all there. They're all hooked up. You can go to them anytime you want. So you're listening to all that while you're talking about something else, while you're being passed information with the latest updates that you're having to read as you're talking and make decisions about whether this is something you want to go with or not, because there was a lot of bad stuff that day.
Because it's easy to speculate and pass on every rumor. It's one of the things I guess we journalists like to do. We hear something, it's our natural inclination to tell other people about it. That's why we're in journalism. But on these days, you've really got to be careful, because there are literally hundreds, perhaps thousands of stories we are hearing, and we really don't know if they're true.
One of the American networks, ABC, is reporting, although not confirmed, that Flight 175 this is confusing. I'm not sure. That was the one from Boston to LA. There's some confusion as to what happened to it after it was hijacked, so we will follow up on that.
And so we just said, you know, let's slow down. Let's make sure before we have our anchor say anything that we know it to be true.
People come to us, all of us in television. They come to us for the information. They come to us to be a part of the community. And that I do think is true. I mean, I think it's one of the things that separates television from newspapers and magazines. It's part of how we are different. It's not a better or worse thing. It's just part of how we are different, which is why we'll be on the air 24 hours, sometimes moving the story just a little bit each time.
We have on the phone with us New York's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, give us your best piece of information as the situation right now.
The situation right now is a massive rescue effort that's going on right now. We're trying to evacuate thousands and thousands of people. I never thought I would see something like this happen. I got there after the first plane hit and before the second, and watching people jump from the top of the World Trade Center is an unbelievable sight.
3, 2, 1. You're on. We apologize, having some technical difficulties getting cells down here, because a good deal of our cell transmission come from the top of the World Trade Center. And you can see the black smoke continues. And to give you a live picture down Church Street, fire crews now walking back toward the scene. We have seen them all morning trying to walk away, because what happens is every time a little piece of the building comes down, a huge black cloud comes at us, making it almost impossible to breathe or see anything in front of them. But now,
usually the longer you have to look at it, the clearer the fact reporting becomes. But in that morning, the longer we were at it, the more confusing it became. Where the hell was Bush?
the big question in my mind, a lot of other people who are based in Washington, is where is the President of the United States and what is he going to do and say about that?
I remember when we were waiting for the first George Bush statement, and we knew he was at some Air Force base somewhere in the United States. That's all we really knew.
Let's go to George W. Bush in Louisiana, the U.S. president facing his first major international crisis.
We were given a fixed time for when he would speak, and it would be a hard count to it. And so we were in his ear saying, you know, he's supposed to come out in 2 minutes. And what we didn't know was that it was, in fact, a recorded statement. And something went wrong at the other end. They had to re-rack the tape.
Well, clearly we are all having a major problem with this. That was not live. I was telling you there were comments that the U.S. President made in Louisiana a few moments ago, and in fact they've now sorted out these problems. The sound may be a little difficult, but they're going to try it again. Let's listen in.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
He'd obviously recorded this statement, and we had to kind of explain to our viewers, who are, I think at this point, very used to seeing live statements and not very used to seeing tape re-roll, and you start wondering what's going on here. The day is already kind of crazy enough, and now we have a president being re-racked on a videotape. It's odd.
And that day, aside from a couple of very brief statements from the President of the United States, nobody from the U.S. government was talking for hours. 2 aircraft hijacked, slammed into the World Trade Center. Both towers hit. Both towers have since fallen. It is unclear how many people were inside at the time of this, but estimates range anywhere from 20,000 to 50,000.
I would like to thank Canadians who have kept their calm in these last 4 hours, and that we hope that the situation will come to a little bit more normality quickly.
Lincoln Holland Tunnels, George Washington Bridge are all closed. The Tappan Zee Bridge is open at this time. East River bridges and tunnels in and out of Manhattan are also shut down at this time.
So the first question we faced was whether we're going to have enough people to put out a paper, much less what kind of paper it would be.
I have an SUV that I use to get around and drive myself around from story to story, and the main highway all along the west side of Manhattan was completely shut down.
Many of our people lived in New Jersey and they lived in Queens, and they were shutting the city down. And so you had reporters, it took some of them 4 and 5 hours to get to work.
So luckily, I convinced a police officer in my neighborhood to let me get access to the highway. I got there in the afternoon, in the early afternoon. And to see, to see this burning wreckage of this site that had once been there, to see all of these emergency personnel, the firefighters, people were just flocking down into that location and trying to get there to help.
We were speaking with a couple of officials earlier trying to get information. They said, stand back, we lost a bunch of guys today.
There was no such thing as official confirmation. The phone system at police headquarters was down. The firefighters, you couldn't even think of trying to call their press office. As a reporter, I would rely on people who had been very good sources in the past, some of whom had been were in an official capacity. But what I found very quickly was that even those individuals, because of this complete communication breakdown, nobody had an idea of the big picture of what was actually going on.
I mean, you know when governments aren't talking, that they don't know what's happening. That makes the situation even worse.
All of the hospitals in New York City were utilizing the hospitals in Westchester and Rockland, Nassau County, northern New Jersey. And the main thing we have to urge people to do is to be calm and evacuate lower Manhattan.
I tried to make it over the bridge, but there were so many people coming over, and I just had to interview them about their stories. And I spent a couple of hours doing that.
I don't know if remarkable is the right word, but it's worth noting again that in every picture that we have seen from the scene, the people who had just experienced the most horrendous imaginable thing
were remarkably orderly and calm as they left the area.
No cars at all, just hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people, moment after moment, spilling over the bridge with varying degrees of dust cover. Some of them had a holiday feeling. Some were merely irritated in that particular New York style. You know, what has this got to do with me? I have stuff to do and I can't do it. You know, I have to get over the bridge. I have a lunch.
One man actually told me that he was in the subway and a police officer fired a gun, fired his weapon to get people to calm down. And I thought that was insane.
The police officer told everybody to form a human chain, and we held on to each other, and he flashed the light, and he directed us to Building 5, and we went out Building 5.
Did you see people bleeding, and what did you see?
Oh, everybody could see. Do you want blood? Here's blood. Everybody's bleeding. People are laying all over the floor. It's horrible. And I was there the first time, and this is twice.
Myself and one other man were there. We had our book bags over our heads. Debris was falling down about the size of this. All portions of the building were falling down. That went on for about 30 or 40 seconds, and that for me was the worst part of this whole experience for me, because I feared for my own life at that time.
There's this light flash out my window. My whole doorway to entrance to my office blew open. My office was freaking out, and I just told him to calm down and get to the center of the office.
There was a woman in a wheelchair with her friend who was being pushed by another colleague, a co-worker, and I asked how she got down.
I heard people shouting. I stopped at like 68, and there's a woman in a wheelchair, and I got her in the strap wheelchair and just carried her down the steps.
Some man just picked her up and carried her all the way down.
Carried her down 68 floors, man. And then we got lost on the 5th floor. It was chaos.
Everybody was on top of each other trying to come down, and then somebody finally calmed the crowd down to get them to come down the stairs in an orderly fashion and get them out of the building.
And what just happened now?
People who came out of the buildings were already struck by that feeling, you know, and probably already feeling guilty that they were leaving and the firemen were going in.
Today is obviously one of the most difficult days in the history of the city and the country. The tragedy that we're all undergoing right now is something that we've had nightmares about, but probably thought wouldn't happen. My heart goes out to all of the innocent victims of this horrible and vicious acts of terrorism. And our focus now has to be on saving as many lives as possible.
By the time I got down to the site, both towers had collapsed. Everything was covered with soot. All the buildings surrounding the site were on fire. There was quite a bit of nervousness that these other buildings were going to be collapsing.
Okay, they're talking about the other building going to collapse. That's why the firemen aren't moving in right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's going to be safe enough for you to stay here. You're going to go back to the Worth Street.
I'm going to stay here for a while.
Okay.
So you want to go back?
Yeah, be careful, because they said when the building, if it does drop, it's going to come in this direction.
When it actually happens, I don't think anybody, I mean, nobody could have ever been ready for this.
One wants to pause, take a breath. What a day. What a time. Another day that will no doubt live in infamy, in history, and the story is still developing. Now, if you're at home saying, well, I'm hearing a lot, but I'm not getting a lot of facts, let me say to you that the facts are few.
Sure, you can tell viewers, you can tell listeners what has happened. It's also important to tell them why and how and give some kind of context. And there was very little context, even by mid-afternoon that day.
It was evident to us as the day went on and as the evening went on that this was a story that was far more than what we felt was being told very capably on the American networks, but was a classic, simple American story of victims and heroes. And this was probably going to emerge, in our view, as something far more complicated.
The United States has put its forces, armed and otherwise, on alert as governments worldwide held crisis meetings today, given the events that happened primarily in and around the World Trade Centers in New York
and the Pentagon. Security has been tightened at embassies, airports, public buildings, and it's fair to say that the country has braced for more possible attacks.
This is more like Pearl Harbor in the sense that this is clearly the beginning of something. This is the beginning of something that we can't even now quite fathom. We can't quite fathom the social effects. I mean, I came into your building this morning and had to state my name and my business into a camera. I have a feeling this didn't happen here on September 10th.
Now take a look at this flight. This is United 93. This took off from Dulles Airport, was headed for San Francisco. Once again, a coast-to-coast flight, heavily laden with fuel, flew on out from Newark to about Cleveland, then took its dogleg, was headed pretty much to the D.C. area, and then disappeared off the radar screens right here outside of the Pittsburgh area, a place called Shanksville. We don't know what happened there. What's kind of odd about this one, Joey, is that at some point after flying past Pittsburgh, the pilot apparently radioed and changed his destination to DCA, which is Ronald Reagan National Airport.
A lot of the telecom companies advising, pleading with people to use the internet to send an email, and a lot of people choosing to do that. Howard Green back with us now with an email he received from an eyewitness.
Thanks, Janice. This is from a gentleman by the name of Mike Daisy, who I understand has been a guest before on The Bottom Line, Michael Vaughn's program, and I'll read the email in its entirety. I'm writing this from downtown New York. In a perverse reversal, I have no way to contact anyone except through my high-speed wireless internet connection. Phones are out and electricity in the area is intermittent. The media will ultimately tell the story better than I, but I can tell you that there is a massive loss of life. The sky is black with ash. The people have been panicking and fleeing in unadulterated terror. The thing that I will remember the most is trying to walk that line covering the story between the human side of the story and the business side of the story, trying not to sound crass about money and stocks on a day like that.
I was just glued to the TV like everybody else. And then an editor came along and said, "Would you like to write something?" And I said, "I really don't think I'm capable." And so the editor said, "Well, if you feel like giving it a try, do it." And then I realized that I really had to try. I guess in a way it was one of the, this is odd to say, but one of the easier things I've written, because I just went into another zone somehow, and I was completely focused and got it done, or it got done to me.
Can you remember your lead?
Oh, Crack in the World, something like A Crack in the World. I remember it felt like that to me at the moment, because I did see most everything live on television. It felt like that when I saw that plane, the second plane, go into that tower.
I think that most people in my position had the same reaction. Well, probably most people in the world had the same reaction, which was that this was like some real-life disaster movie. Like, we couldn't believe our eyes. And it is, you know, you can say whatever you want about the evil of the terrorists, but it was a brilliant piece of art, what they accomplished. And I know how offensive that must sound to people, but, I mean, just watching it on television, no Hollywood producer would have thought of that in a million years.
I think we began meeting maybe at 3 or between 3 and 4 o'clock. We had our first meeting.
We tried to figure out what was possible for us, you know, given our resources, given the time allowed. It happened on a Tuesday morning. We normally go to press on Tuesday night.
This edition was a single magazine. And so determining the flow of the material was a little easier for me than it might be for some people who hadn't had that experience.
We had essentially maximum about 22 hours to get the story photographed, reported, edited, fact-checked, fit
a thing which was interest for us was where the Israelis in the building or not, because many Israelis were supposed to work for financial or technology companies. So I broke the story to sub-stories the way I used to do with buses exploding in Israel. You know, you cover the story, you send people to the hospitals, you send people to the Prime Minister's office for comments and so on.
Then we faced another interesting question, which was where were we going to run these pictures? And we have a picture of a severed hand, and we have a picture of someone leaping out of the building. And I, again, felt that you had to be true to this event, and you couldn't be squeamish about what you're going to show.
This is the cover. We are a tabloid. We used both front page and back page for the story, and the headline here from right to left reads, "World in shock."
This picture came in late in the day, I think about 4 o'clock, if I remember right, and that, you know, there was a recognition that that's it. That's the cover shot. What's good about it? It shows what's going on. It shows it's the second plane. The first plane has already crashed. It's instantly recognizable. It's iconic. There are the towers. You can see the second photo going in. You can see the plume of smoke.
They printed 1,200,000 papers, just kept running, which is 300,000 or 400,000 more than the normal press run, and sold every one.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
And it's probably not at all unfair to say that the entire country is, in some measure, in shock as to what has happened to the United States in a psychological, symbolic, and very physical way on this particular day.
Again, we don't have any clear casualty figures in the city, and it may be a long time before we do. 1010 Wins reporter Lisa Evers is also downtown and keeping track of the rescue effort.
At the same time as new people are coming in, there are also those workers, those firefighters, those police officers who've been out here since very early this morning, coming out covered with layers of that gray and white silver, that gray and white dust from the explosion.
I was exhausted. I was drained. I've never been that tired, but it was beyond that, because even halfway through, like as the sun started to fall on that first day, and they brought in these huge portable lights to illuminate the situation and illuminate the rescue effort, I felt a heaviness, and I'm a very energetic person, and I'm used to long days and hard work. But the heaviness, it was almost like you could almost feel it as if it were a gravitational pull that was just dragging you into the ground because of the sorrow and just the pain.
I'll tell you, Peter, there is a pervasive sense of anger among the military officers I've talked to today. They have mentioned again and again Pearl Harbor, saying that it is going to be dwarfed. The number of people killed in Pearl Harbor so many years ago, just about 2,600. They say the casualties from this one are going to be so much worse. They are ready to go to war. There is a sense of war here at the Pentagon.
Pentagon ground to Condor 2.
According to the White House, it was the president's idea to return to Washington. His security detail didn't want him anywhere near the place. But I think in hindsight, it was probably very reassuring for Americans to see him in the White House that evening.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger.
It was the worst single hostile attack on the United States, but it was also the greatest rescue effort, I think, certainly in American history and maybe in modern history.
The survivors of the World Trade Center are the one bright spot in this bleak story of violent death.
We kicked down some debris, got out into the core area, made a left turn, found what's called Stairway A. There are A, B, and C stairways in each building, and we began our descent. We only went about 4 floors, however, got down to about 81, when we got into a bit of an argument. We met people coming up who had clearly come from I guess a flaming floor, a smoke-filled floor. They said, "Oh, don't go down, there's fire," and I was convinced that we must go down, get below the fire.
Brian Clark. Finding Brian Clark, I suppose, is the way you find anybody. I had heard the night before, when I was wired up by telex and listening to the National, waiting for my turn to talk from the New Jersey shore, I'd heard an interview with a Canadian family whose son had been in the Trade Center towers. And I knew that the next day, that was probably going to be the story for us.
They sort of swung the debate, this couple coming from below. And they convinced several of our people to go back up, that it was safer to go higher. I didn't like that logic.
And when I phoned him, in fact, I was a bit worried because he was so matter-of-fact in the initial conversation that I was concerned that he wouldn't be able, in fact, to convey the emotion and the enormity of what he'd been through.
All of a sudden, there was nobody else at the stair.
I got separated
from the other group that I started to lead down, and I sensed that they had gone back up. But I didn't know for sure. But I said, I'm going down to my new friend Stan.
Experience told me that if I asked him to recall that at the end of that conversation, that would probably be a very emotional moment for him. And so I waited. I let him tell his story.
My friend Stan, you know, said, "You saved my life, you saved my life." You know, he's still, when we talk on the phone, he's ecstatic about it. But I think Stan saved my life too, because he got me out of the debate. You know, he pulled me off the floor, out of the stairwell, rather, you know, where this debate about should we go up or go down, and they went up. And I came back and wasn't in a debate any longer, and Stan and I went down.
You know, he's just a fabulous person. He was just, he's an extremely devoted father and a son and a brother, and we just lost our father last year, so this would just be a little bit too much for my family to handle.
When you realize then that they felt that thousands of people had died, we wanted to write victim story that first day of who the victims were, but there was no list. These leaflets went up all around the city. People printed out on their own computers, or they went down to Kinko's and they did these posters, you know, missing. If you've seen this person, please call us. And these, of course, were all people at the World Trade Center that day. And we decided that to do these victims, to write stories about them, we just take the leaflets and call the phone numbers on them, and take the pictures off them and put them in the newspaper.
The first phone call, it was not as difficult as you think, because people thought that their loved ones were missing, and they said, "Oh, thank you for calling. Please, this is what this person's like. He's a very wonderful person, and he's very funny, or she's, you know, this or that. Please help us find him or her." And so that's how it was. So it wasn't like any of us were saying that anybody's dead. It started out as, these people are missing. And I think that's what the thought was. I think it was wishful thinking on everybody's part.
I remember there's one person who tended one of the transmitter antennas for one of the stations, you know, who worked on the roof. I was just struck about, you know, so many people loved that building, you know, and they felt such a fidelity to the building, even people who hadn't been there long. he loved the building, but, you know, he had such a devotion to his antenna. You know, he cared about that antenna more than he'd care about a friend. And I guess he thought of the antenna as a friend.
It is always tough, but it is part of being a newspaper person. Calling the people who've just experienced a tragedy is something you're trained to do. Usually you do it once a day, or at the absolute most. Maybe you do it one day and then you don't do it again for another few weeks. This was calling 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 families per day at the beginning. And these people at the time, when it began, you know, they were hoping for another phone call. They were hoping for a phone call saying, "We found your husband, he's alive." Instead they got a call from the New York Times saying, you know, "Tell us a fun story about your husband."
You might be able to see behind me Times Square, which is normally one of the busiest parts of this city. It is deserted now.
It's so lonely, New York now. The streets are like empty. There's no people walking around. Everybody's walking like they don't know where they're going, and they're like, their minds are everywhere.
Grab 5 or 6 other firemen there. If I've got any fresh companies here, I want 5 officers to report to this command post right now if they're standing out there with fresh companies.
They had a couple of thousand firemen standing around desperately wanting to get on that pile and start working the pile and looking for their comrades and for other people that were buried. But it was too dangerous and the pile was shifting, and so there were a number of attempts to try and, "Come on, everybody, let's get on the pile." And everybody would go onto the pile and start picking, and then a minute later, everybody off the pile because it seemed to be too dangerous.
You just move to a clear area out of the way. We got to set to clear up, all right?
So most of that night was basically spent in sort of a sense of profound desperation and frustration that I've never experienced before. Because these guys were there to work and they wanted to work and they couldn't, and they were standing around and they knew what that meant for the people that were lost.
The streets were empty, people were bowing their heads, pain was clear everywhere. And with all these firemen and all the people working and the smell and you know, you were scared. I mean, I was scared. I was feeling, it was like a sacred place in fact. I was so afraid that I would walk anywhere where there was a body part.
Today we have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people.
As the day went on and as we tried to deal as best we could with the human drama in New York and Washington, I think it was probably easier for us as Canadians, one step removed, to pull the camera back, so to speak, and to take a wide shot on what story was unfolding. And I think it was clear to us in ways that probably surprised us that what we were talking about was a story that had consequences and had implications that extended well beyond New York and Washington, well beyond the United States, and extended into the Middle East and into the Arab world in ways that would probably change our world forever.
Some of the networks played that one picture of the Palestinians celebrating September 11, and it was played over and over and over as if to brainwash and say, oh, look, the whole Palestinian population is celebrating what happened to America on September 11. There was no mass celebration in the Arab world. Yes, there is a lot of anger with American policies, no doubt about it, and it still is. But this is not to be confused by hatred for America.
In the first day or two, you were just covering the story and just giving the facts of what had happened and updating on the number of casualties and so on and so forth, and whatever new information was coming through in the investigation. But I think after day 2 or 3, I immediately turned to a story that was to do with the backlash, or the feared backlash at the time, relating to the Muslim and Arab community in New York.
I actually tried to speak to cab drivers because such a huge number of them come from Middle Eastern or Muslim countries, and actually went to a center where cab drivers are really based out of, and found that so many of them hadn't shown up for work for 2-3 days since the attacks had occurred. And I spoke to the manager there, who told me that they really feared for their lives and felt that it was quite risky for them to come out and work so soon after the attacks.
I wasn't in New York, but it was a story that just connected us all. My days in the Middle East were suddenly brought home because there was obviously this connection. Osama bin Laden's feelings about the Palestinians, using the oppression of the Palestinians, using Israel as a reason for taking his terror campaign outside of Saudi Arabia and his own region, outside of the Middle East.
More isolated with each passing day, Afghanistan's Taliban regime speaks to the world through its embassy in neighboring Pakistan. Ambassador Abdul Salam Zaif says the prime suspect in Tuesday's attacks, Osama bin Laden, couldn't be the culprit.
In modern war, the first invasion is journalistic. Our trek took us through vastly varied terrain, mountains and glacial lakes, and finally, desert.
It's Cass in Kabul ready to feed. Hi.
It was an enormous catastrophe. It intruded on the mood of the nation. We now understand that it was an eruption from a piece of the world we didn't know much about, from a feeling in the world that we did not take into account.
We actually had something that would fill this yawning, gaping hole that we have to pour news into. And we did well because we had something big enough to fill it. Most of the time we don't.
I can't forgive these people. I can't forgive these people, you know, they killed the city. You know, this two building, heart of New York, they killed the city, man.
I never thought the towers would collapse. And then the first tower collapsed. And even then, it didn't occur to me, or something was stopping me from understanding that the next tower would inevitably collapse as well. And so every step of the way, I was like bowled over and really shaken by what was happening.
If I'm having trouble sleeping, it's because I've been on TV and I've been working really hard, and there are people who are having trouble sleeping because their husband didn't come home, or their wife didn't come home, or their father didn't come home. And anything that any of us is going through is not remotely comparable to anything they're going through.
Was in my bed at like 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun was starting to come up, and I just sat there and just let myself cry because I knew I had to get it out of me in order to be able to continue the next day, which I knew was going to be another hard day, and another hard day after that, and another difficult day after that.
To many generations, this is their Kennedy assassination. This is that thing that they will remember forever, where they were, what they were doing.
I mean, this is a story that is going to be with us for the rest of our lives, I think, not just in our memories, but on a daily basis.
And I sort of now at 79 years old figured, well, I've seen all I'm going to see, and there ain't no more to be seen or to experience. Then this thing came along.
Well, as Rex mentions, that's it for me on a day and a night that none of us will ever forget.
But there reaches a point for everyone. And for some it's on air, for others it's after they get off the air, where you are suddenly consumed by what happened. I mean, we are only human. I mean, for me, it happened after I got off the air. And a couple of hours afterwards, when I was at home, and one of my daughters phoned me, just to say that she loved me, which is a normal thing that, you know, parents and children say to each other. But it was at that moment for me that I, you know, she was reaching out. I was in need of hearing from her. And boom, it all of a sudden hit me too.
I left London after 2 years covering World War II, believing
the Londoner who lived through the Blitz was a breed of man the world would never see again. And I saw him again. September 11th, 30 blocks south of here at the Trade Center.
September the 11th, I don't think I'll ever cover a bigger story. And I still can't, to this hour, I can't incorporate it.